Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, folks, wherever in the world you happen to find yourself. My name is Carmen Mazzara, and I serve as Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs, to which all of your graduate programs belong. We are so glad to welcome you to another APSIA career webinar, and in particular, the UN YPP event is one of our favorite events throughout the year. And so I'm so grateful to our colleagues from the UN for joining us today to share this special opportunity with all of you. If you have any technical issues as we go through the webinar, please feel free to send me a direct message through the chat. If you have questions for our speakers and our panelists, please feel free to put those in the chat, either as a direct message to me or as something for everyone to see and share. We do have a bit of a presentation and then we'll open the floor up, and this is a great chance for you to get your personal questions answered while our UN colleagues are captive with us. So I do encourage you to pose those questions and to also listen carefully, because there's a good chance that some of your higher level questions will be answered in the course of our discussion today. We are fortunate enough to be able to post this session afterwards on the APSIA YouTube page. So if you want to revisit any of this content or any of our other career webinars, all of that lives there for you, and I'll make sure you have that link by the end of this particular session. And so with that, thank you all again for joining us, and I'm delighted to turn the floor over to Julie Weintraub from the UN. Thanks, Julie.
Thanks so much. Hopefully you can all see my screen at this point. Excellent. Always nice when technology works. So as Carmen said, my name is Julie Weintraub. I am the team lead for the YPP exams and have a couple of colleagues here with me as well who are going to be kind of popping in and taking over some slides as we go. So I'll let them go ahead and introduce themselves and then we'll get started.
Hi everyone, should I go first? Thanks, Julie. Nice to be here. My name is Pina Rose. I work as a team lead in our Department for Strategic Management, Policy and Compliance at the UN headquarters in New York. And with my team, we are looking at supporting, in particular, equitable programs that help increase the workforce diversity at the UN Secretariat globally. And the Young Professional Program is one of such programs that is explicitly designed for un- and underrepresented nationalities at the UN. So this is part of our portfolio to really promote and create the engagement on that. So very happy to be here and talking through the slides with Julie. Back over to you, Christina.
Thank you. So my name is Christina. I'm happy to be here with Julie and Pina, and I won't be sharing slides, but I'm here as a resource. I am a former YPP finalist, so now I'm actually in my first assignment at the UN. Pina's my supervisor on this wonderful team, so I'm happy to be here and just share my experience if any of you maybe in the Q&A have specific questions that I could provide insight into. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks, Christina. So I just quickly want to go over what we'll be covering, and then we'll go ahead and jump right into it. So Pina is going to start with an overview of UN careers and some different entry points. Then we'll dive in a little deeper into the Young Professionals Program, YPP, and then we're happy to really open it up for Q&A after Pina will then kind of take the floor again to give some insights and some other programs that are being worked on in UN careers. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Pina.
Thanks so much, Julie. And I'm just going to talk a little bit before we dive into the YPP itself, the program and the exam areas that Julie will explain to you, a little bit about the work of the UN Secretariat very shortly that we carry out day to day, basically. We have mandates from the General Assembly and other main organs of the organization. And we work, as you certainly know, in the area of peacekeeping, human rights, humanitarian affairs, climate change, economic and social development. So these are our area of focus of the UN Secretariat. The world really looks to our organization for solutions to global problems. And I think really our organization is unique in the sense that, as you can see, our people come from over 190 nationalities, 193 member states are being represented at the UN. And we work for hundreds of different departments and use these stations around the globe. So truly diverse and universal in that sense. And that means also that we are working in multicultural teams alongside people from all professional backgrounds who have different perspectives, experiences, approaches, and expectations as well. Ours is among the, I think, the very few organizations in the world that are diverse by design and default, as we say. And our people are really our greatest assets. So we have, as you can see, over 36,000 staff members worldwide, and also in different duty stations, as I mentioned, all around the globe, that work in 9 what we call job networks. So this is a way of categorizing basically the different functional areas in the UN Secretariat that you can perform into these job networks that I mentioned in the beginning. We are a multilingual organization, so we have 6 official languages, and they are really important for all our work, while English and French are really sort of the working languages. You might encounter a duty station where your level of Spanish can be extremely helpful, or Arabic, Russian, Chinese, and other also more local languages that are being spoken at various duty stations. Maybe just a few words also on the work we do to create a more inclusive workforce and a more diverse sort of workplace in the United Nations. We do have different strategies. You see them listed on the right side of the slide here. They're all focusing on different areas of diversity, or diversity dimensions, as we call them. So we have a strong focus, of course, on gender equality and parity. We work very closely with UN Women to make sure that this becomes more and more reality in our organizations. This is a very, very important mandate for the UN, obviously, but we can see still persisting gaps in certain functional areas and certain positions. We have a geographical representation strategy that is relevant for the UN Secretariat, and the YPP is one of the programs that looks at how to improve the representation of those nationalities that we don't see well represented yet. We have furthermore a disability inclusion strategy that is very, very important as well, to make sure we really leverage the potential and the talent of all our workforce, regardless of disabilities or not. And we make sure that we also promote a work environment that enables people with various disabilities or identifying themselves as having a disability to perform well. We have a youth strategy, as well an anti-racism strategic action plan, and a workplace mental health strategy. So this is just to give you an idea, what are the different diversity dimensions that we actually work towards and improve every day. On the next slide, I want to just say a few words. What are some of these key skills? And I think you are at a pivotal time in your educational life and professional life, and I think now at the stage where you are at to choose a possible career for you, a profession, a job, whatever it is, however you define it, this can be very informative, just to give you a sense, like, what are really the key skills that are needed at the UN that we need to strengthen across different functions. The first one is really data analysis and communications. We have a huge mandate, as I mentioned in the beginning. We are delivering solutions for increasingly complex global problems. And data, the ability of understanding and analyzing and communicating data is absolutely essential. So if that is something that you feel, you know, is a strength that you have, or you would like maybe to look into disciplines that have data at its core, then I think this is definitely something that we need to strengthen in the future more and more. We also look at innovation and digital transformation. So really, how can we digitalize more and more our way of working, our operations? We are building a culture of performance and results orientation. Strategic foresight is one of the I think key areas as well to be fostered and strengthened, and behavioral sciences, and that is very dear to me because I would consider myself as a behavioral scientist. I'm a psychologist by training, but it's such an important area where I see that a lot of UN organizations, agencies, funds, and programs are leveraging this methodology more and more to make sure that whatever program they're creating has actually an impact, and how they can also communicate that impact. So the behavioral sciences is a hugely growing, I would say, field in the UN. And then you see here on the right, there are all these different key skills as well: climate action, resource mobilization, partnerships, human rights, sort of the human rights approach in all our objectives, a crisis response, and strategic communication. So these are really the areas that we call key workforce capabilities internally, but eventually there can be broken down into skills, into key skills that we really seek out more and more in talent we want to bring into the organization. Then just very briefly for you maybe to get a better overview, what are the different entry points and the job networks? I mentioned them already in the first slide. Here you see them listed. So on the left-hand side of the slide, you see the job networks that vary really from the economic social development area, functional areas, to a science network. We do have scientists at the UN, to the political, peace, and humanitarian, that is maybe more known, but also management and administration. Julie, Christina, myself, we sort of are part of that job network with our functional areas. We have a legal network that is very key because the UN has its own judiciary system, and legal sort of network is very key. And we, of course, are, as any global organization, looking at a global supply chain, logistics, transportation as well. So this is just to give you an idea, like actually these are the different networks, job networks, where you can find positions. So don't focus only on political, peace, humanitarian, or maybe economic and social development. If you have a different background, you might find actually an interesting job.
Internet, ich wollte es halt, das ist ja in dem Zug zum Hören, das ist alles Zeug, was ich schon weiß, aber ich wollte halt wenigstens.
Great, sorry, Christina, we heard you for a second, that's why I stopped. But it's all good now. So there are different entry points. Of course, the Young Professionals program is one of them, and it's a key one that Julie will introduce. But we have also UN volunteers, consultancies, internships, and of course, regular job openings that include job openings that are fixed term or permanent, but also temporary job openings. So these would be something to look out for you as well. And then we have a lot of people who start their career as a junior professional officer, including myself. I was kindly financed by my government to start off as a JPO. So that's also a program possibly for you to consider, but that depends really on your nationality and whether you're Ministry of Foreign Affairs would sponsor such a program. So that would be something you need to look out for with them. And then when you come across the different positions, I think it's maybe helpful to give you an idea when we are requiring or hiring for a P2 position or a P3 position, what it means in terms of years of experience. So you can just see that breakdown a little bit on the right side of the table. And now we're going to focus really on the Young Professional Program, as I mentioned, the YPP short, in economic, social, and development. Economic affairs, not social, economic affairs. This cycle, and in the information and system technology. And Julie will talk a little bit more about the exam areas as well. So back to you, Julie.
Thank you so much for that, Pina. Yes, so we're actually going to start off with a very quick 1-minute video. Hopefully the technology will work and audio will come through. But this is just to give you a very high level overview of what is YPP and Young Professionals Program. And then we'll go through in greater detail and break it down. So fingers crossed this works.
Julie, I'm not sure if it's just on my end, but I hear the sound very like broken down. I don't know, Carmen, if you can, you hear it kind of. Okay, sorry, maybe it's just on my side then.
So maybe it's just coming through my mic rather than from the screen itself. But let's just continue on with it, since the words that are up there on the screen basically are the audio as well. I'll try and sit closer to the screen. All right, so if you were not able to see that video or hear it rather, it is linked on the careers.un.org/YPP site, which we have on the bottom of every slide at this point. So hopefully you'll go and visit there, and there's a link just up top on the main page about what is YPP. And you'll be able to see that quick video, and you can share it with your friends as well. But we're going to go through these 3 main stages of YPP. So we'll talk about the application process, the assessment process, and the roster placement and selection. Just want to point out up top that the application period is open already. Applications are being accepted through 29 June. So you have 3 weeks, which is more than enough time to get your application together if you're interested in applying. And we'll talk about exactly all the ins and outs of YPP now. So applying for the YPP, the Young Professionals Program, is the same as really applying for any job opening in the United Nations. You'll go through Inspira, you'll fill out a lot of information on yourself. And the difference really is that when applying for YPP, bring in
I think you're back, Julie. Sorry, we lost you for a second. You were just frozen.
I did see a message pop up on my screen that my internet connection is not terribly stable. I am in the office, so it's not my
That's why.
well, so anyway, we're just want to cover now the 4 basic eligibility criteria, and YPP was started to help rejuvenate the organization, so bring in fresh young talent and also improve geographic representation. So that's really where our first 2 eligibility criteria come in. YPP is unique in that it is the only recruitment process at the UN that is limited to specific nationalities. So only individuals who have a nationality from a country that is considered to be an or underrepresented member state with the UN can apply. So there are 57 out of the 190 plus that Pina mentioned. There's 190 plus member states within the UN. 57 of those are or underrepresented with staff. And so that full list of 57 is on the website. We'll also show it up on screen in just a little bit. But each year the list of participating countries does change based on whether new staff have come in or left. So nationality is the first basic eligibility criteria, and then age to be able to meet that rejuvenation. Candidates must be 32 or younger. Education is just a bachelor's degree or its equivalent in an area that's relevant to the exam. So in the job openings that are posted for the YPP exams, there's a list of degree areas that are here. And then language, simply fluency in either English or French is required. You really want to be careful though when you're going through your application that you accurately reflect your ability in those languages. First off, if your mother tongue is English, you don't want to forget to include that you do have full fluency in English. That is a common mistake that we see. So in order so that your application is not immediately screened out, you'll want to make sure that you, again, represent your language skills appropriately, and fluency in a language means fluency in all 4 of these areas. So if you are able to work in a professional setting in either English or French, you would want to indicate that you have full fluency in either English or French in all 4 of those elements. What you don't see here is work experience. So there's no work experience required for YPP. That's another kind of unique aspect to applying for YPP. So I'm not going to try showing you the 5-minute video here. That'll take up too much of our time, but just know that if you do go to the YPP page on the careers portal, there's a 5-minute video that gives application guidance because it goes into greater detail about some of these common mistakes that we see to make sure that you can get your application screened properly. So then we go into the assessment process for YPP, and the basics of it are an online exam and an interview process. Of course, it is a little bit more complicated than just that, so we like to break it down for you. The online test takes place in 2 stages. So all individuals who are invited, if you meet those 4 basic eligibility criteria, you would be invited to participate in the test. And from that, you would be given access to the UN online test platform. And in there, we give you as much preparation materials as we can. So we would give you a suggested reading list. We would give you sample questions so you can practice your time management skills as well. We make sure that candidates are really just comfortable and familiar with navigating within the testing platform. The exam itself is presented in both English and French, and the first stage of the exam is all multiple choice questions. So you should figure it would be around 2 hours, and you would be taking multiple choice questions. You can view them in either English or French. And that first stage is really a combination of assessing your cross-cutting competencies and skills that would be relevant across work in any UN job network, combined with multiple choice questions that are really more specialized to the specific substantive area. So we had said for this cycle, it's going to be covering economic affairs and information systems and technology, so that there would be an exam for economic affairs, and it would have a balance for stage 1 of really cross-cutting questions, along with specific questions for economic affairs, and likewise for the IT exam. So candidates who then pass that first stage of the exam would be invited to participate in the second stage, which takes place about a month or 2 following the first one. And this stage of the exam would be specific to the specialized or substantive area, but then it's open-ended questions. So you'd be really given kind of some case study type questions, and you would be producing a response rather than answering multiple choice questions. Again, for each stage, as candidates are invited, they'll be given as much material as we possibly can to make sure that you are comfortable and prepared. And then the final stage for those who pass stage 2 of the exam would be an interview. So all interviews are conducted in a live setting, but in a video-based way. So typically it's on Microsoft Teams, and candidates would be given, again, information about the format of the interview if they make it to that stage. We just want to highlight real quick, though, that there are many for-profit entities out there that are selling materials related to YPP, and you just really want to be cautious about handing over your money to those entities, because as I mentioned, we do really provide candidates with the materials directly in the testing platform, and we could not endorse the authenticity of any materials that you might be paying for. So just want to make sure that it is very clear to everyone as well what success on YPP means. As I mentioned before, applying to YPP does not mean applying to a specific vacancy. It means that when you are successful in YPP, you will be placed on a list of successful candidates, and that list or roster is really used to fill the vacancies as they come up over a 3-year period. So if you are about to graduate and you are looking for a job coming right out of school, YPP is not going to give you that job right out of school, but what it is going to do, it's going to really leave the door open for you to have a career in the UN. So we really want you to look at it as investing in your future career, investing in the potential and an opportunity to join the UN and have a really rich career. Candidates should be open to accepting an offer in any of the various UN Secretariat offices, and we have the main offices listed here on the screen, but of course there might be other locations as well, and candidates should really be open to accepting any of those like locations. Something else unique with YPP that's not necessarily up here, but after 2 years of being in your role, you would then be offered an opportunity to make a change and take on a new position. So it could be in a different office, in a different location, or it could be in a different job family within a relevant job network. So if you join through the economic affairs exam, for example, and you accept a role in Bangkok, it could be then that 2 years later, you switch to a more statistics focused role in New York. So just one of the benefits of joining through YPP is that you do get this built-in mobility in your career and built-in exposure across different areas. So just to kind of encapsulate a lot of what we talked about, I want to give you some quick facts and resource reminders about YPP before we turn it back over to Pina and then open it up for some Q&A. We have the list of the participating member states, the 57 countries that are currently underrepresented in the UN. So these are the nationalities that are accepted for this year. Again, they do change each year. And in case you can't read this list, they are up on careers.un.org/YPP, which we hope you will all visit as well. The exam areas for this year are economic affairs and information systems and technology. And you'll get a little bit of a feel for what the possible work would be in those areas if you go into the job openings on Inspira. And you can find the links to those job openings again on the YPP page on the career site. That application period is open through 29 June as a reminder. And we'll put this up again, but you just want to remember to follow the official UN careers pages on social media. There are a lot of unofficial pages out there that pretend to be part of the UN, but you just want to make sure that you are following specifically these handles to get the accurate information. All right, so with that, I'm going to pass it back to Pina real quick.
Thank you, Julie. And yeah, I think it is, as Julie mentioned, definitely a longer term investment, but also I would suggest a really fantastic learning experience. So if you decide to go for it, to try to apply for the YPP examination or one of the examination areas this year, just try also to, of course, prepare, but enjoy the process as much as you can, because I think it's, looking back, always a fantastic opportunity to get input, to show your knowledge. That's always very rewarding. So I think if you shouldn't hesitate if you feel this is something for you, you're eligible, you might have discovered your nationality in one of the participating member states, go for it and try to apply. Just here, if you want to further diversify your, let's say, your engagement with the UN Secretariat, and maybe you might be in a position right now where you feel it's too early to apply for the YPP, or you wouldn't want, maybe your country is not part of it, you have other eligibility criteria issues, then what you can do today is to already register and subscribe to our UN Global Talent Pool. And that's really a way of staying in touch with the UN Secretariat for upcoming opportunities. So maybe you feel like, right now I just don't feel ready for an application. I don't have the time, lack the interest, whatever. Want to do something else first. try to be engaged with the Secretariat, because you never know, at some point there might be an opportunity that comes across through that talent pool to you, and you might get invited for a webinar, or you might get a job, a vacant job opening that is of interest to you. And you can always stay in touch with us like that. So you can, it's a very simple form to register, takes a couple of minutes only, and you will be subscribed for 2 years, so 24 months. You can always unsubscribe at any point of time. It doesn't substitute an application. So this is a subscription. You can get information, from the UN Secretariat, but you would still have to apply and complete your application profile for a real, let's say, job or vacancy when you see that in the future. But yeah, just want to encourage you to do that already today as well. It's a great way to keep in touch with us. Great. And then if you are already, if you feel like very inspired and motivated now, and you're someone who cares about sustainable development, and you're passionate about making a difference, then we really hope to see your application either for the YPP before the end of June, in subscribing to the talent pool, or maybe for any other vacancies that you think you feel interested right now. So yeah, thank you very much for listening to us and your interest. And here are also some resources. Again, the talent pool, you can screen the QR code. And there's also all the resources Julie mentioned on the YPP. So I think it's a good first step to go there and inform yourself about it. Thank you. Back to you, Carmen, I guess, for Q&A.
Well, thank you, Pina, and thank you, Julie, for walking us through the many different ways to get engaged with the UN. We have a few follow-up questions, and I invite our colleagues to pose more in the chat as you like. Julie, just to clarify, the list of underrepresented countries is specific to YPP and specific to this year. Is that correct? And secondly, could you explain a little bit more about how underrepresented is defined?
Yeah, thank you for that. So exactly, YPP is the only recruitment effort in the United Nations that is limited to specific nationalities. So if you were looking to apply for any other roles across the UN, you don't need to even worry yourself with understanding un- and underrepresented member states and what that means. It's specific to YPP, and it is specific each year. It changes. So the way that it is determined, basically, if a nationality or a member state is un- or underrepresented in the member state, it's based on a sample of positions, basically, that that there are posts that are funded across the United Nations, and there's many different factors to the formula that I'm not going to go into, but suffice it to say that, for example, Vanuatu is a country that has no staff working in the United Nations. So that is how it's determined if a member state is unrepresented. And then underrepresented, there is a quota or a target number of staff based on the idea of having geographical representation balance across the organization. So each country has a target range of staff, and if the actual number of staff working in the United Nations is below that target number, then the country is underrepresented. So that's kind of the basic description of how we define. But just know that there's a lot of statistics that go behind it. And each year, as I said, that list of un- and underrepresented member states is going to change. And that really means that we are having an impact. So for example, last year there were 60 countries, I believe, that were invited to participate. And there has been a change where countries have been able to move from underrepresented to represented and within range of their target number of staff. So we really look at YPP as a tool to help improve that geographic balance across the organization. So if your country is not listed, it means that there are an appropriate number or sufficient number of staff working in the United Nations, that we don't need to take these extra efforts through YPP to recruit through it. But you're still welcome by any means to apply to any other recruitment process in the UN.
Thank you, Julie, for that very careful and diplomatic answer, as would be expected. If for some reason someone makes it through the YPP process but does not come off the roster, do they have to go back through the process assuming they still meet all of the criteria again, or is there a different situation for someone in that position?
Yes, so if somebody makes it onto the roster and is not selected into a YPP post over the period of 3 years that roster is valid for, if they are still interested in YPP and still meet the eligibility requirements, they would need to apply again, because the process is changing every year and there's different exam areas. But what I would say is that very many candidates who are on the roster and are finding that they're not being given an opportunity, or that they don't meet the criteria for specific opportunities with YPP posts, there are many other types of job openings in the UN, and those that are on the roster are looked very favorably to potentially be selected for other roles outside of the roster, outside of YPP. I see that Christina has come on screen here, so I don't know if there's anything that you want to add here.
Not from my side. I think that was really comprehensive. Yeah, and I haven't heard of anyone not getting placed so far yet in my WhatsApp groups that I've had just fellow YPPs in. So
great, thanks.
We also had a request for kind of a recap of the timeline. So applications are due June 29, and then broadly, when would candidates expect to hear, and how would the rest of the timeline unfold?
Thank you for that. Yeah, it is, we have broad stroke timeline in the job opening. So if you are interested in applying, you'll see that it is not a speedy process, but it's also not a speedy process by design, because we want to remember that we are looking to establish a roster that's going to be used over a period of 3 years. And so the roster that we're creating is going to be replacing essentially a roster that already exists and will be expiring a little bit down the road. So basically, you'll want to figure that the application period closes end of June. It would be likely a month or two after that you would find out if you were invited to participate. And then once you find out that you're invited to participate, you would have at least a month of advance notice where you'll be able to really study and prepare through that access to the online testing platform that we talked about. And then you have stage 1 exam. We had already talked, then stage 2 is going to be about a month or two after that. And as stage 2 is open-ended questions, there's a lot of kind of manual scoring that is done after that. So as you can imagine, that takes another couple of months. Then we reach our interview stage, which might take a month because of the volume of interviews that we're doing. And then our roster is established. So really, all in all, you want to think from application period to finding out the establishment of the roster, and if you've made it onto the roster, we're looking at really just about a year-long process, and then you have the 3 years of the lifetime of the roster. So not speedy, but it's really designed to be a rigorous process that is, again, investing in your future career.
And Julie, another point of clarification, once you're on the roster, are you the one who goes and seeks positions, or do hiring folks come to the roster to seek you?
Yeah, good question. So basically, there is a placement team, a YPP placement team that really helps to manage that process. So pretty much on a quarterly basis, that team will be communicating with those that are on the roster, letting them know the positions that have become open over that period of time. Candidates do not need to do any sort of formal application or formal assessment. Once you make it through all of the hurdles of the YPP exam and get onto the roster, there's no more assessments and no more official applications or anything along those lines. And you will kind of have your hand held essentially through the vacancy process by a dedicated team.
Thank you. Pina, you mentioned JPO, and we have a colleague who's curious about some of the differences between JPO and YPP. Could you give us some high-level look at those two pieces?
Yeah, sure. As I mentioned, the JPO is an sort of a program, but it's not an examination-based program like the YPP is. The JPO is a program that is funded, sponsored by governments. We have a number of different governments across the member states of the UN Secretariat that are sponsoring, let's say, young talent in various areas of their interest to be working in those, let's say, in those areas. That can be, in my case, I was a JPO that was funded by Switzerland, my government, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who see it as a key priority for them to have someone also working in the area of management, HR, talent acquisition, etc., etc. And that can be another government who might find it strategic to place someone in humanitarian affairs, because that's really something where that government also is investing in and sees sort of a return of investment. So it is a purely government funded program, but with the intention that you collect work experience, and you're, by the way, a full staff member during this time of the program of the United Nations. You collect relevant work experience, and you will equip you then later on to be much more, let's say, fit for applications. So you can compete better, you have that experience, and often there is an opportunity to be sort of integrated into the workforce. It's not as straightforward as with the YPP, where the YPP is really like, as Julie mentioned, a UN managed examination program, and you will have you will be right away integrated into the UN workforce, and you will have an internal opportunity to be part of a YPP mobility program, and so that's much more a career program. The JPO is a great opportunity to get first-hand experience at a professional level in the UN Secretariat, with the intention that you hopefully stay and seek out for other job opportunities, and you're much better equipped to compete. That's just in a nutshell.
Thank you. That was very concise. I like it for a very complicated thing. One other question for you, Pina. You talked about P2, P3, P12 and a half. Are those typically spec'd to begin with a master's degree and some experience, or a bachelor's degree and some experience?
Yeah, that's a great question, and exactly. Apologies for all these acronyms. We love acronyms at the UN, so it's kind of, I guess, not unique to our organization, but definitely will counter a lot. So these are just the different levels of job categories. In this sense, in this context, it would be professional levels. So P2 would be more junior, P3 then it increases, it progresses, right, to seniority level. And for those, it's definitely highly recommended to have a master's degree. There might be functional areas where you can have a bachelor's degree, and then actually what you would need to look out for is that you collect more relevant work experience to substitute for that master's degree. So that's definitely a possibility. It depends a little bit on the, on the work you do, the functional areas, the departments you work with. Some departments kind of try to be more specialized, or are kind of more specialized, or perform more specialized works. In that sense, it makes sense that you have a kind of a more specialization through your education. So a master's degree helps you with that. But other functional areas or departments are much more open to consider candidates with a bachelor's degree, and then kind of the relevant experience that would substitute for the master's degree. So for instance, master's degree for a P2, or let's say a P3, it would be 5 years of work experience. And if you have a bachelor's, just make sure that you have an additional 2, basically, so 7 years in total. Back to you, Carmen.
Thank you, and well done to all of our students for already being on that path to have their graduate degree and be ready to come in at P2 and P3 levels. We have one last question before we need to wrap up, and Julie, it's back to you. You talked about the 2 areas of emphasis for this year's YPP being economics and IT. Does it have to be formal training and a degree in economics? Does some coursework and exposure to economics count? How deep do they need to be in something like that to qualify for the Econ YPP level?
Yeah, thanks for that. So I don't want to try and define how deep or not deep on our recording today, but what I will say is take a look at the job opening. So I just put the link for the Economic Affairs job opening, Economic Affairs YPP job opening, and the Information Systems and Technology YPP job opening. And in the education section, they really list clearly there are the main courses of study, there are the degree areas that are accepted. And so this is another one of those tips that you would see also if you watch that application guide video, that you really just want to be very careful in terms of accurately reflecting your degree in your application and not selecting other. So for some reason, that other category and the pull down menu in Inspira can be very attractive sometimes when the name of your degree doesn't match directly with one of the pull down options. But if you select other, Inspira does not know how to interpret that, and so your application for YPP specifically would be screened out because it must be in one of those relevant areas that are listed in the job opening. So you want to be careful about that. And I do think that the degree areas are a little bit broader than just specifically economic affairs or information systems and technology, but I'll let you all interpret for yourselves exactly how broad they are once you take a look at the opening.
Thank you for that great advice, Julie. And as always, a reminder to read carefully, students, what is being presented to you, and to make sure that for this year's YPP, you meet the different criteria. And we've had the great privilege of doing these sessions for the last several years, and it really does change. And so if this year doesn't make sense with your nationality or your emphases, we invite you to come on back around this time next year, and we'll be able to showcase for you perhaps a different set of citizenships and a different set of skills that the UN through YPP specifically is looking for. And as Pina mentioned, there are so many different ways to contribute to our global community through the UN, in addition to YPP. And so be sure to follow those official channels and to stay in touch with your career offices who've seen these processes change over time and know how best to channel your great interest. With that, we are at time. I want to absolutely thank our UN presenters for sharing all of their wisdom and advice and cautions with us. And thanks to all of our students for being here. We look forward to seeing you at the next APSIA webinar and hope you have a great rest of your day wherever you happen to be. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.